Good day, everybody. Today I have a special guest, Felisha Junge with Green State Credit Union. Felicia has been in the business for a long time, actually. How long has it been?
I think around like 22 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Been around a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
You don't look like
feel
you've been there. Well, you don't look it. So
Thanks.
Yeah, it's like, and especially in this business,
I know,
this is so
exactly.
stressful.
You haven't seen the before or after picture yet,
Right?
So.
Yeah, like in another 22 years.
Yeah, I got a new business card.
Yeah, exactly. I think I still got my picture from 2013 on mine. So.
Oh, perfect.
Hey, it's like I should probably get another one, but.
It's okay.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Well, I'm really grateful that you came in today because I know you're super busy, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And you've been, the number one lender in the state a few times, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been 10 years, hopefully, or somewhat 10 years in a row. We'll see.
That is insane volume.
Thank you.
And especially with, it's slowed down a little bit, in the last, probably year-ish. It's kind of started to fluctuate a little bit just because, man, the whole economy is going crazy. So everybody's trying to figure out how to handle their money, what to do with it, what assets they should keep, get rid of, interest rates. But, before that, it was just insanity. And, with it being really a seller's market, that means there's extra buyers and probably way more applications. So that's insane to handle that.
Yeah, it was fun, especially during COVID, but now it's a little quieter, but that's okay.
Yeah. So what do you think about like COVID and everything? I know you kind of went through that. What was your experience with COVID? What was that like for a lender?
It was busy. There was one day I think we locked in like 38 people with the refis going on because the rates were dropping so drastically.
Yeah.
But, it was crazy. It was busy. I mean, I'd love to see that again, for everybody's sake. We don't want to have COVID levels, but, hopefully the rates will come back down here soon. And
yeah, we all hope that.
Yeah.
It's like we got to be getting some kind of a handle on the inflation, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to have maybe 1-2 more bumps, it sounds like, and then hopefully by then we'll be under control.
We'll
good.
See.
Yeah.
So maybe first quarter, second quarter, 2024?
I guess hopefully second quarter would be my guess, but I don't know. We'll see. Usually during election years you see that influx back down, but this has been kind of with COVID and the inflation thing, it's been kind of a new thing for all of us. We haven't really been in this situation before,
Yeah, and it is difficult because we are kind of in new territory as a whole, and the whole world is trying to kind of figure out all of it. We have wars going on, and we have a lot of people that are outsourcing work to other countries because of being able to go online, which is been amazing, but it also creates new things and hurdles that we have to kind of figure out to get through it.
Right. Yep.
So it's a weird time it's a great time, but also a very stressful time in many ways to be a human being.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that. I mean, even with grocery bills or, the cost of groceries is so expensive right now too. And I mean, especially that, that first time home buyer, how do they pay for groceries and then figure out what their budgets are and can they afford a new home? So the affordable housing thing is a big, big deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Kind of going back to COVID, what were some of the things okay, you guys got 38 loan apps in a day or closed them. What were you feeling people were saying at that point about what was driving that market, do you think? Why was there so much activity?
Well, the hard part is that, so prior to that, the rates were higher. I mean, they were in the I want to say high 3, low 4s, right? And then literally over a week span of time because of the shutdown, the market almost essentially crashed in its own way. And so then rates dropped a whole point. Well, if you have say you have a 4.5 rate and you're dropping to 2.5 or 2.875, why wouldn't you refinance, right? You get more for your money, right?
Oh, way more. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why we saw that so much. And the nice thing, with working with somebody who's been doing this for a really long time is, we keep track of that we try to keep track of that for our clients, to see, okay, where are they at? Where's that break point? And where does it make sense? And we have those conversations. So, being a good financial planner, you're going to help your clients to get from point A to point B if you see like an opportunity for them.
Yeah, I think that's great, because then it also like creates, loyalty and a long-term client base. And then you're like, hey, I'm actually like working with people over a longer span of time.
Correct.
And if you see them like benefiting, that's like the best feeling in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you can save somebody like $200 or $300 a month, and
it's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially right now, I mean, like we did that.
Yeah.
So now like, rates on the credit cards are going up. So if people are using any of their credit cards, they used to be, in the high teens.
Yep.
And now you're seeing rates in the mid 20 to high 20s.
Yeah.
You're paying a lot more. So hopefully that helps them in regard to that too. And that's kind of the cool thing too, is like you talk about asset allocation, but also about debt allocation is just as important as asset allocation.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
And kind of knowing the interest rates and, how that cash flow might shift on you, and you're trying to manage a lot of people, like I'm an entrepreneur. So sometimes it's like, I'm like, oh man, I'm rich, man. This is incredible. Then other times I'm like, I hate my life, I know. But it's not like that for everybody. Right. So a lot of people just get their checks. And so that calculable kind of like, $300, for instance, extra is huge.
Oh yeah. Especially for somebody like, let's say they're on fixed income, like they're retired and they're on Social Security, or like that's a huge deal for somebody who's on Social Security. They have an extra $300, $400 a month. That is a big deal.
Now they're pumped.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, hey, I might actually buy a car instead of take the bus.
Yeah. And then the other crazy thing, I'm sure you guys felt this during COVID too, but I mean, people were spending more time in their home.
Yeah.
And so because of the rates being where they were able to upgrade because they were spending more time in their home. They're like, you know what? We need a bigger house. All my kids are at home. We're homeschooling for a short interim.
Yeah.
And now we're also having, maybe one or two or both spouses at home permanently during remote work.
They're like, we have to get away from each other.
Yeah.
We need a bigger house.
Exactly. I mean, I feel that sometimes, but
that's part of life.
Yeah, exactly. I love my husband, but sometimes we all need some space.
Yes, we do. And it goes both ways. So
it does. Yeah. He probably needs some space for me. Luckily I went to work every day. So
yeah.
He didn't have to worry about me working remote.
It's like, what is that book? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or whatever it is. And they talk about how the differences in men and women. And it's like men need to go to their cave to process things. Yeah. And women are like, no, I just need to talk it out. And guys are like, I need the space to be like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Because we just construct it differently in our minds. And that's the beauty of obviously men and women just having a different perspective.
For sure.
But it's hard to see the other side of the fence sometimes from, your natural disposition or whatever. Well, that's cool. I kind of felt that too. It's like people were, hey, I can work remotely. And then all of a sudden, your mind starts trying to, project out and be like, well, what does that mean for me? It's like, oh, maybe I want a bigger house. Maybe I want to have a better outside area because I'm spending so much time here.
Right.
And all of those kinds of things. That way it's not so boring and you're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So
I think more companies now though, especially even at Green State, they're kind of, and I've heard Collins is in this route too, but they're kind of leaning away from that now. So it'll be interesting how that shift happens and if that impacts people's perception on do they need this much space or not. Now that they have this space, are they going to move because they don't need this space?
Yeah.
Now that people are moving back into the work environment because, Collins, like I said, Green State, we're not hiring as many people remote. We feel like maybe it's not as productive at home.
Yeah.
Their efficiency isn't as high. And
I could definitely see that. There's a balance point, right?
Yeah.
It's I think I don't know. It's kind of you get the work done. Doesn't matter if you're in the office argument, but then on the other side, you're like, would you have gotten the work done faster or more accurately if you had some mix of being in the office and maybe not all the time, but I don't know. It's definitely an interesting time. I just don't know what to think about all of it. Yeah. I've been working remote pretty much for a long time because we're always working as agents and brokers. Like, you could be on the beach and you're still having to kind of like work through things. So it's like, okay. But then everybody else kind of got on that same wavelength. And then it was actually kind of cool because you're able to relate to other people in a different way that was more closely like aligned to what your experience in life has been. So I just was, pumped about that.
Yeah. I mean, I worked a little bit remote, but I wasn't as much remote, but I am a very people person. So it's very important for me to be somewhere. Be where people are, or I'm like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I needed to be at work, or that's how I felt more comfortable. But like the nice thing is, like you said, if you're going on vacation or taking a break in our world, in the real estate world, we went skiing a couple of times, and I was able to work in the morning and then ski during the day, and then come back from the afternoon and still work. Yeah. But yeah, it was fun, but now we're back at it, right? Now I feel like, I'm sure you're experiencing this too, the grind, it's a lot harder.
Definitely. I'm totally feeling that. And I've been doing it, since 2010, so I don't have quite as many years in the industry, but I've seen, that was right after '08. And so it was like already kind of a weird, cycle where it was like a straight buyer's market all the way. And you obviously probably remember. But now it went all the way to an extreme seller's market. And now we're kind of like, shifting a little bit back and forth. And it's a weird environment because, the rates are higher and inflation and everything. But population growth is still a thing. And then also the rent rates start to, shift and find a new balance point that ultimately makes it, again, more expensive to rent than it is to own.
Right.
And so it's only a matter of time before that balance point always ends up, finding its space. And then it seems like a great idea to get mortgage, and then the market kind of resets and, moves back and stuff. So it's, for me, been very interesting to see the whole cycle. I'm just like, all right, it's really interesting. I don't know what to think about it.
Yeah, it's been challenging. I think it's made people get back to the basics.
Yeah.
On working hard, making sure you're present.
Truly.
Also, you have to be very creative, I feel like, in this environment because of the rates being where they are. Mm-hmm. Like I said, going back to debt allocation is okay. Maybe you get a bunch of money from the sale of your house. Maybe how do we reallocate that to make it work for your family?
Yeah.
If the payment's higher,
Definitely.
Going and having those conversations, I think, is really important, especially if you have somebody who understands it well enough. It's easy just to take all the cash and throw it down on the next house, but sometimes that might not make the most sense.
Truly. I think that's one thing that's great about, you guys at Green State versus a lot of banks out there. I mean, you guys are a credit union also, but also even mortgage brokers, right? I was having a conversation with a client, and they were really kind of set on wanting to use a mortgage broker, and I'm like, well, why? What is it that's this thing? And it just comes down to that mortgage broker doesn't have extra products, so they're having to sell what they do have, but that isn't always the best thing for you as an individual. Right. In the space looking to make financial moves to stabilize yourself. And so I was just like, hey, but think about it like this, you could do a home equity line. They can't offer you that.
Right.
There's a lot of different solutions that, you can consider, but if you're doing a broker, there's only one solution.
Yeah, or somebody who might not, let's say they don't have a credit score.
Yeah.
Right, that comes up a lot, especially right now, because we're seeing a lot more first-time home buyers getting in the job market or in the housing market.
Sure.
So if they haven't built any credit, we have a secure credit card that would help them build credit pretty quickly.
Awesome.
Where a broker's not going to be able to offer that or give them a solution for that.
And you guys are there after the sale, right?
So, all the way through. Yeah,
they're gone.
Yeah, it's just a transaction, but we really want to maintain somebody long-term, as a long-term client, but also as a member, meaning checking, savings, credit card, whatever we can do to help.
Auto loan.
Yeah, exactly.
You could do some wealth programs. I know you guys have that on the back burner too.
Yeah, we have wealth management. We have trust account. We have it. We have the whole gamut. It's just what works for you and what makes sense for you.
Yeah.
And figuring it out.
That's cool.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. Well, awesome. All right. Kind of to take it back to you've been doing this a long time. What what do you think about the industry if, like, let's just take ourselves and zoom out of like today's marketplace and just think about like what's been your, experience doing what you're doing, and just kind of like look at it from like more of like a personal development place.
Yeah.
Like what are the obstacles you've seen in your career? How have you overcome them? And what's your experience been like?
Yeah, it's been really good. I initially came from MCI. I was on the phones.
Oh God, I forgot all about that.
Yeah,
MCI.
so, yeah, I know.
That was a thing at one point.
It was, that long distance call from that random person, making sure you had the long distance on your phone. That was me. So,
oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was fun. But I came from there and I learned the skill of selling, and then MCI went through their hard time, obviously, with WorldCom. And
yeah.
So I saw that, and that was kind of eye-opening at a young age. But then I got into mortgage, and it was just a natural fit. I love numbers. I started at household finance back in the day, and it was kind of like a BC lender back when it was, it was harder. The rates were higher at that point.
Yeah.
I really didn't know what I was doing either.
Yeah, you got to fumble around to kind of get it figured out.
When I was really young too, so I didn't have the experience of having a lot of debt or that piece either, or a family. Throwing a family in the mix of having a career and then trying to figure out finances is a whole nother thing.
Totally get that. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, this is way different because I can't just like, burn through unlimited hours of like focusing and like just literally selling your soul to the craft until the project's where it doesn't need that. And so I'm still trying to like, get out of that mode and be present, at home, and then also
the
come back
work-life
to it.
balance.
It's insanely difficult, I gotta say, but I'm starting to figure it out, and it feels good. But being an older guy too, like having my first kid a couple years ago, it's really important to me to be present there, and going through the whole crazy thing with this company initially, and like finding a lot of success, kind of what sort of it takes time and effort. And so it's been kind of difficult for me to get that balance, because it's like I'm the kind of person that's like kind of like like a mad scientist, where it's like I just get consumed by whatever it is, and then I'm like, but now I'm like, oh, I got to put my head back up and like
pretend everything's okay when you go home, even if it might not be, right? Or if you had a really bad day, you've got like a 3-year-old looking you in the face, just saying, "Hey, Dad."
That's right.
I want to hang out with you,
And that actually helps too, because it makes you like kind of take your emotional temperature, and then you're like, damn, like I just let myself get hot out there. Like, and then you're like, this baby doesn't care about that. So then you're like, okay, cool, I got to like tone it back. And it's really difficult in some ways, but in many ways, like it's probably the best medicine for me as a guy, because otherwise, like, your life's over and you're just like, what happened? I just rushed through the damn thing, and that was great. But
it's
being present's very important.
I think it's like, even as you get older, it gets even more intense. Like it's interesting. Like I've kind of felt that lately too. What's worth it, like in the end, you know what I mean? And just thinking about that. But the work-life balance has been really important to me, just because when I married my husband, I have a stepdaughter, and she was very young, and so I had to figure out like maneuvering that. Like I was bringing a new little one into my world, and then being a woman figure to her, I take great pride in that. And but I'm also a really hard worker and very competitive, so just figuring that piece out, is very important for me to be there, pick her up, be at the events, like be a mom to her, you know what I mean? And
because she's gonna remember, it's like when you were a kid, there's like probably a million moments that you remember that your parents don't even ever think about, but it's like it was in passing, but it was important to them. And so you're trying to make sure that like you're creating a lot of those moments and showing them that you're there for them.
You're there. You're like having dinner with them. You're talking about, like, right now my kids are in middle school, so we're talking. And in high school, it's like you can't have the same conversations. A little bit different. You're asking them who they ate lunch with, just so you can figure out kind of like what's going on in their world, because they don't want to answer a lot of questions. Yeah. And so it's been good. the hard part with our jobs, it's easy to think like we work quote unquote banker's hours. That's what everybody always thinks. And like I'm on the clock just like a realtor. Like I don't have a clock.
Well, I can say from experience working with you that like, you've definitely been open to picking up calls or taking apps basically almost any time, which I've been like, I don't know how you're doing this, but
we figure it out, right?
You're doing it. So that was, helpful, and people were able to buy houses and get good deals on properties that the market doesn't really care what your hours are.
Right.
The deals are there when they're there.
And when they're not, they're not.
They're
right?
not. Yeah.
So you definitely have to maneuver that. But you also have to figure out, like, there's times where, unfortunately, in our world, where sometimes people don't respect that as much.
I think in today's world especially, maybe more every year almost, because of the
COVID thing, I think, took it to a new level because everybody was at home.
Yeah.
So like even like let's say you're a Rockwell engineer and you're working, from 8 to 5. Like you're working 8 to 5, but then it's Friday night and you know what I mean? Like it's easy just to text somebody, or I've had people text me at like midnight and I'm like, I'm in bed, I have no idea. Like I'm sleeping. I need this low nap. Yeah, no, and I'm like sleeping. Like literally, I'm sleeping.
That's insanity.
Yeah, and it's it is what it is. But I think during COVID, I think people forget we still have like our lives, that we have to have with our kids and. Yeah. But it is what it is. I mean, I think the people who respect you will always respect that time, and then there's some people who will always just not respect it as much, and you have to maneuver through that. It's just as a person,
Yeah, because it's just people, Yeah. And so but I think that like helps you define kind of like what you were saying. It's like it helps you to like be better about, it's more intense as you get older because you're trying to kind of, time is your real money, right? Because like you can't buy any of that back.
No.
So then you're like, okay, well, how do I make sure that I'm prioritizing that time? And then you also have to say, well, how do I align? Why is that what it is? Right. Like, how do I know that? So it makes you have to go inside and really get to know yourself at a higher level than maybe you previously had to.
Yeah.
And so then, like you let those clients fall away much easier when you're coming from like a, more authentic, true place, because you just realize that's part of it. And you're not going to be able to please everybody, even if you want to. It's like, that's a recipe for disaster. I've been there several times. And then you just end up like, damn, like those people really aren't worried about,
they don't care.
And so then you're like, well, hey, it's about having personal integrity. So you try to find a way to, be okay with that and spend the time that you need to in the priorities and just not feel bad about letting some clients go, which, you can kind of feel guilty sometimes. But
yeah, but sometimes I feel like it's always the people who may not have the best credit or who are pushing and I'm willing to work with anybody. It's not that. It's just that even if you don't have good credit or sometimes there's still boundaries there not to be pushy, because these people are also the ones helping you get your loan approved too. And I think that's the hard part, is like just seeing that part. But it is what it is. I think the biggest thing for me as I'm getting older is, I've had some people get sick close to me, and, figuring out like sometimes every deal isn't worth it. I mean, do you know what I mean? Especially when somebody's not nice to you.
Well, because then you're going to be like, hey, I've got to like, wash this crappy energy off of me before then I go support my kid.
Or go to the next person who deserves it, or who deserves it. You know what I mean? And like that's the hard part. And as I get older and I see people around me getting sick or not living as long as I thought they should have, like I have to go to a funeral today for a 50-year-old woman who was a teacher at our school.
Yep.
It just puts it in perspective. Like life is short, and and especially with our kids, like I don't want to bring that bad energy home. And but I still want to work hard. I still want to be number one. Like I still, you know what I mean? Yeah. But like not gonna. Good. Yeah, I'm still competitive. I want that, but I don't want it to the point where it breaks me, because I think that's the fine line. Where's the breaking point, and how hard am I gonna work? Like the mad scientist, thing that you're talking about. I totally feel
work
that
like crazy. It's like I'll just be like working like crazy. It's like, and that's where a lot of the best things in the world have come from, is like, you know, if you even look at like classical composers like Beethoven, or, I mean, these guys are just like, whenever the inspiration hits them, it's like they just work through it.
Right.
And I've talked to a lot of different people. Like I was talking to this like scientist guy from the U of I that was talking about that exact same thing. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And have you happened to read or hear about Rick Rubin's new book?
No.
It's called The Creative Act. And Rick Rubin basically is like he's like a music producer. He produced like the Chili Peppers, the Beastie Boys, you know, countless acts for movies. He's like this kind of like old sage guy. And the book is really cool because he talks about that creative act in a way, and how you need to like honor that. And it's just like, but also you have to show up every day,
Right.
even when it's not like that kind of inspiration or whatnot.
Right.
So it's kind of, you know, it's a give and take sort of thing, and you know, you
Yeah.
can get sucked in if you aren't careful.
Well, and I think the like going back to like showing up every day, like, so I mean, obviously the market's harder, or
Yeah.
just it's been different than we've ever seen it in my career, because I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen rates go up this high so quickly. And even with my realtor partners and, you know, my friends that are out there like trying to do their jobs, like my realtor friends, my mortgage lender friends, like anybody in the finance world right now, it's hard to show up every day.
It is, because you're not getting those like wins. You're like, I just want to make a basket.
Yeah. And they're not, I mean, it's
know.
not easy, because, you know, we have some buyers that it might not be as easy to work with. I mean, you know, if you have like a lot of FHA clients, for example, you know, sometimes they're harder. Sometimes it's harder to get the deal done because the house might not be perfect, or something on their bank statements doesn't show up right. I still think like the one thing that will define me maybe from other people is just showing up. Like, just always showing up.
Consistency.
I mean, like if you don't show up, people forget about you. I mean,
you got to be out there and present, and it's, you know, just by showing up, it's like that's marketing,
right?
Because, you know, people are going to be,
it's
they're going
hard
to know you're there.
Yeah,
right?
and it's easy to bury your head right now.
It is.
You know, like,
trust me, it's tough, like on the real estate side and on the, you know, brokerage side of it too. And, and you've seen like a lot of the inventory change. You see, basically, like we were running a stat, like I want to say it was like, I don't know, about 30 to 40 days ago, and we were looking and we were checking it out, and it was literally 50% of the listings on the market were new construction listings, and some of those were built in 2021. And so you think about the other 50%, and that's just going to be your regular, you know, sellers and listing inventory. But that's not a great mix. And you know that the people that built prior to COVID and got hung out to dry in a way, you know, this market has changed so drastically that, like, you know, you're a builder and you're like, hey, I'm going to build a house, and then all of a sudden all this happens. You're like, my plan is completely gone.
Well, you're sitting on a house for 2 years and your rate is like at 8%, and you're sitting on a construction loan. I mean, that's scary.
It is scary. And, you know, you built the house when material costs were much higher because of COVID and because of the derecho here, especially in our market.
And then you have a shortage of labor.
Yeah.
That you're also paying for. That's expensive.
Yes.
It's crazy.
I feel bad for those guys, man. That's crazy.
Do. And it's not even just that, though. The crazy thing, too, is I looked at a stat, and it was mortgage lenders. So from 2020, there were 160,000 mortgage lenders in the United States. And now that they're like, it's dropped almost by 50%.
Wow.
Yeah, over the last, like, 3 years. Like, a lot of people, like, I would say last quarter, it was rough on them. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. I had the worst November I've ever had in my 22 years of lending. And I was depressed. I mean, I was really upset. Yeah. It's depressing.
Well, especially when you're working really hard and you're trying to make contact, right? And you're just like, what's going on? And it's like some things are just out of your control. And you got to go back.
I can't control that. I mean, I can't. Exactly. I mean, I'm doing everything I can control, but it's still the heartache, you know? And it's almost like you're so used to being so busy. Yeah. And then you're trying to control that busyness in your own way.
Yeah, I definitely feel that.
Yeah. It's been really eye-opening, I think. And I mean, I could say that like last November, anytime anybody asked me how I was doing, I almost cried, you know, like,
yeah,
I didn't know what to say. Like, I'm
Yep.
not doing okay. You know what I mean? It
Well,
was hard.
Yeah. And people are just always asking those questions because
Yeah.
it's like, it's just the common, it's like, how's
I
the
know.
weather? But you're
but
like,
when you're
hey,
like, don't ask me that question today. I'm not going to be, I'm
really
not
wanna
okay.
know?
I know, I'm not okay today,
yeah,
you
no,
know?
I definitely get
And
that.
I felt that a lot, like over the last year and a half about, you know, it's like some days I'm okay and some days it's just hard, really hard.
I think that's comforting probably for, many people to hear though. And I think that's why like even just what we're doing right here is important because you can get into your own world. Like I know I do. And I'm like, man, like I'm pretty hard on myself in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And not because it's like, only because I expect like, excellence out of myself. Right. And it's like, it's not about perfection because that's like a recipe for disaster. That's not a real thing. But it is about trying hard and trying to continue to evolve, personally in your craft and whatever it is. But it can be difficult when, the rug's out from under you and you're like, what? Where did it go? You're like, it's never been gone. Not like that. So you have to like really, go inside and like get creative. That's where the entrepreneurial mind for me comes out. I'm like, okay, what's the big picture? How do we get through this? How do we look and find out ways that might work or not work? Mm-hmm. And then you have to kind of like, choke on your pride in a way. And that is hard, way harder than you might think. You might not even realize how much pride you have until you have to choke on it.
Yeah, or you're really depressed too. You know what I mean? Like figuring that piece out, like digging yourself out of that, like when you're having a bad day and still having to, I mean, I hate to say this, but like doing even podcasts or like video, like it can be super intimidating.
Sure.
And getting out of your comfort zone and doing things you don't necessarily love, but you do them anyway because you don't have, that's the next step.
That's where you're at, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just trying to figure that piece out too. And so I've really, I've gone out of my comfort zone trying to figure out, okay, what are people doing that are, the people who are on top, and how do we continue to do that even when we're struggling?
Absolutely agree. But hey, it's kind of like nature in a way also. It's like there are 160,000 lenders, now there's 80,000. So it's really just like cleaning things up in a way. There's a lot. You have to be really good at your craft now.
Right.
And so, it's great for the consumers because basically whoever's still in the business that means that you're actually, dealing with somebody who probably knows something.
Oh yeah, no, I hope so. I hope you're dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing,
But when times are good though, it's like,
there's a lot of people in the business who might not know.
Absolutely. And then they're out already, right? So they might get in for like 3 years and it's like, you've been in for 22 years. Like, who's going to know more?
I don't know. I mean, I learn something new every day,
I know.
There's a lot to be said for that too, just learning new stuff as you go, even
Definitely.
like as the market changes, like I said, even with like podcasts or like video, I mean, I'm still learning through that and trying to figure out, okay, does that work or doesn't it? Is it too much? Is it too little? How often do I do this?
Oh man, you can
get
the
Facebook thing, like, I mean, and Insta. I mean, it's
a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And you have the new gen, the next gen, and
what are they gonna want in 10 years?
Right.
So you're like, well, what? If my experience is I was born in X amount of time, it's like, and I was born with an iPad in my hand, 10 years from now that I never had the experiences of not seeing the internet, those people are going to be driving a lot more decisions. Mm-hmm. So what kind of products and services are they going to, expect? And also, where's technology going to be in 10 years? Because we know in 2013, it was a lot different landscape with apps, with anything, with AI,
even with paperwork. Like in 2011, we were still doing everything by paper, you guys.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, now we have an app. We have an app that actually lets you just like figure out where you're at in the process. It alerts you.
Yeah.
And
way more efficient.
Yeah, it's way more efficient, but it comes with other challenges too, like, the face-to-face, like, hey, come into your office and see what this is, like, or even for you. I mean, I'm sure I've had some buyers buy a house and they haven't never seen the home.
Yeah, I've definitely had that happen.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. Are you like, are you sure? And I've had some that regretted it.
I know, you're kind of scared for them because you're like, but it's not my decision also. And,
right.
And so you have to like balance that.
Yeah, like some of them, like I've had one that just regretted it, so they had to go in and like clean it up and then resell it like a year later. But making the kind of maneuvering through that is it can be difficult sometimes, or even the younger generation, like that face-to-face interaction. I love it.
I do too.
You know, and I kind of was lucky because I mean, like, same with you, Rob. I mean, we're both born in that like 80 range where we're still like kind of old school, but still, we're still new school. Like we can kind of like maneuver between the two worlds. Yeah,
we're kind of like in a pinch in a way because we can, talk to the baby boomers.
Yeah.
And we can also talk to the, millennials and be like, hey, here's where it's at.
Right.
And there's like a lot of wisdom in that. But it does put a lot of pressure in some ways on you because you've experienced something that others haven't. So it makes you have to really believe in yourself, in your own value of your experience to go out there and be like, hey, no, this is actually probably good or not good. And it's a weird bridge to be in that age group. I think everybody that I know is kind of feeling that weird crunch.
Right.
And you can just feel it. I mean, I feel like the whole damn world is just feeling this pressure of like, what are we doing? We're like trying to redefine what it is to be successful in a work-life balance. And the other crazy things I've seen is like, with COVID, it's like all of a sudden you have everybody jumps on that Robinhood stock trading app.
Oh yeah.
Or they're trading cryptocurrency and, all that craziness. And, and a lot of the creators, like content creators and just people are finding ways to make incredible amounts of money, but like, they're not really doing anything to make that money. And when you look at how an economy is generated, it's like, well, what if the guy with the hammer doesn't show up to build the house that, allows for all the realtors and the mortgage lender and the builder, for everybody to get paid. And so that like, if everybody did that same thing and made money that way, that would mean that nobody would ever want to swing a hammer again, probably.
Right.
So it's like, well, what does that really mean for all of us? And it's really challenging us to understand, what's fair and what's not fair. And
how do you solve the labor crisis though too? There is that too. That's the hard part. There's a labor shortage. I mean, my husband and I own a company and we that labor shortage is kind of a big deal. I mean, and trying to maneuver that,
like just finding good talent.
Yeah, exactly. And that's difficult, or even like, I mean, I have some rentals. And even figuring out, hey, the handyman situation, it's like, hey, I need this fixed. I need it fixed quickly. How do I get somebody out here to fix it?
That's going to do a good job.
Yeah, that I'm not the handy person, So just maneuvering that is that labor shortage, I think we're going to have to figure out a solution for it. I just don't know where it is, what the solution is, or, and figuring that piece out. But it's definitely interesting.
It is. It's good though. It's making us have to kind of like, just reprioritize like we were kind of saying before. It's like, and I think if everybody's cup is like full in some way, everybody just performs better. But it's always kind of like a thunderstorm moment where you have like a hot or a high pressure system come in and it, interacts with a low pressure system. And, if you watch the weather and it's like, it sucks for a minute. It's like there's lightning and thunder and sometimes stuff like breaks, but then it's like the calmest it ever could be after that. And so I feel like we're kind of in a metaphoric, like, economic and personal success, baby boomer, millennial, just this smashing of like information and people and making jobs work and all of it together.
I mean, we can even see at the grocery store,
That's right.
The checkout line, like I saw a post the other day of somebody who was mad because, everything's moving to self-checkout.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, well, I mean, I hate to say this, but some of the high schoolers just don't want to work at Hy-Vee to bag groceries. Like we used to do that.
I actually bagged groceries when I was like 15. I remember that. And I actually kind of liked it.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, I didn't have to have a job when I was that age because I had to just get straight A's. But but I mean, like I saw that post and I was like, well, if we could get people to fill those positions, then we wouldn't be in the situation to begin with. I wish we could solve that problem if that's really what the consumer wants. But I don't know. I found it.
I know. I always go through self-checkout now. I'm like, this is so easy, you know, and like, not that it's like necessarily the, right thing to do every time. And I don't always do it, But, usually I'm like trying to be on a mission, and so I'm like, hey, I can get in, I can get out, and it's nothing personal, but maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, the hard part is like, if it's like just a like handful of stuff.
Yeah. I'm not like getting a cart full.
I know. I figured you weren't,
Yeah.
But when I go too, I only buy, like my husband actually thankfully does a lot of the grocery
Nice.
shopping. I know.
He's a good man.
Yeah, he is. So he like probably has the big cart, and then he's probably not going to do self-checkout with that. Yeah. But on the little stuff, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with COVID too, I mean, people were so apprehensive if they were going to get sick or not. And, I get it. Like sometimes people just feel more comfortable going through self-checkout because then they touch their own stuff, and
that's another good point. Yeah,
they don't have to touch it. And so I mean, I get it. I don't know, it's just that we as a consumer, I mean, have to think about these things too. How's that impact our everything that's around us?
Yeah, it definitely makes it a lot more difficult, and I think that's where like our politics are really starting to feel it. But it's not about like blaming others. It's about saying, hey, like, how the hell would you know everything? Because I don't either.
Right.
So like, I can't look at you and be like, it's your fault. That's just not, just, honestly, it's just ignorance.
And we're all to blame. We're all in the situation.
That's what I'm
together,
saying.
You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever your situation is,
Hey, if you're still alive, you're still here. So that's a
we're all doing
thing.
Good, right?
Yeah, you made it.
Yeah.
So, no, and I totally get that. So I think this is going to be a super interesting election also with like, another Kennedy is running.
Right.
And that is like, that's almost like eerie in a way because you have this old world like JFK thing. I know like being my age or your age, it's like you knew about the assassination. You weren't around for it.
Right.
But now there's like still some legacy of that whole storyline, and it's coming, now back around, and it's like, where do we live, man? This is insane.
I know. I think it'll be really interesting to see how all this plays out. And I mean, for me, whatever platform you're on, I truly hope that we can get some of the interest rate environment figured out, because I think it's a big deal, like a bigger deal than we're all talking about.
Oh, it's insanely big.
Yeah, I hope that there's a soft landing that they're talking about. I mean, really. But for us, because of the rate environment, it's harder to get people to list their homes. I think that's going back
That's what we're feeling over here.
Yeah.
Totally.
So if we can get more people to list their homes and have the buyer have more options, you're going to control pricing that way, because prices won't keep going up because you have bidding wars. I mean, anything under, 200, 250 that's decently priced and that's a nice home is still going off the market fairly quickly.
Anything for sure under even two. If there's anything under 250 or even 2, like they're gone. Even if they're not great places, like, and you're just like, oh my God, this place sells for 150 or 160 grand, and you're like, I remember a time not that long ago that this was like 110.
Right. And that's the crazy part too. I mean, the prices have gone up because of the lack of inventory, right? So we have more inventory. You're going to see prices stabilize a little bit more. I don't think they're going to drop. I think a lot of people are waiting for this market crash to happen. I don't think we're going to have that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been hearing about it for, I don't know what now,
like
a year and a half.
Yeah. I personally don't think that's going to happen, but because I think you're still going to have people hold on to their homes because they're in low interest rate environment. Yeah,
it's like, why would you get rid of it?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, you might not ever see a 3 or a 2.5 again. And if you have that, God, it's like, what are you going to do? Go get rid of that to then, pay way more for less?
Right. Yeah. That's the hard part. But I do feel like if they got it down a little bit, people would start making different choices, because people you're going to still have that first time. Well, you're going to have a person who lives in an apartment, who just got a job, who wants to buy their first home.
Yeah.
We still have a lot of that going on right now, but you're also going to get that person who just had a kid or who is growing family. They have to move because they either have a new job, they have a bigger family, they don't have enough space, and they have to change what they're doing.
And it all just like rebalances. Like
right.
It's more of a psychological thing, because I even remember when those rates were that low, like I was like, this is not sustained. There's no way that this can go forever. Like, and because you just know it's like money means nothing at that point.
Right. It was so cheap, but that's the thing people forget. We were in the middle of a pandemic when that happened, you guys. Right. Like, totally. Before that, it wasn't like that. There's never been that low of a rate. Like, never. Yeah. So for somebody to think, like, I always laugh because sometimes people come in my office and be like, hey, I'll see you when that rate's 2%. I'm like you're not, I won't see you ever again.
I don't know that's a thing.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, good luck, you know?
You might be waiting a while.
I know. I might not see you again, but I hope I do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's been a good relationship here.
I know. So I mean, if we could get them in that, like, you know, even 5s, I feel like at this point, because they were in the 7s there for a hot minute. I mean, still some people are locking in that low 7 range. If they can get it a little bit lower, I think people will get used to it.
Totally.
And they'll forget.
Yeah, because we're really just like, you know, every day we get up and it's like, well, here's what the conditions are. You just have to deal with it. And if you're like hanging on to the past about something like that you're just like going to hurt your current life. Right. So you're like, hey, well, you know, because living in a house, especially being in the residential market, not commercial, it's like that's your life every day. Right. Are you going to, like, you know, have a poor experience because you're waiting for some intellectual thought process to, like, maybe come true that's fairly unlikely? Right. Probably not the best move for your psychology to feel good about life.
That too. And then, I mean, the other thing to think about too is we have this big boomer population too, right? That they're going to sell or downsize. Yeah. Right? They're not going to live in their house forever. So you're going to have that transition, like that influx of the first-time generation and then that influx of those baby boomers, right? Yep. So I think that will be really interesting to see how that transpires, because I feel like I said, I feel like if we got rates in that, even that low 5 range, people would make different choices. Absolutely. It wouldn't be that big of a deal anymore.
I think I bought my first house when I was... Actually, strangely enough, I think it might have been in 2008. And my rate was like, I think 5.7 maybe. So it's like...
Yeah, I think I helped you, right?
No.
Oh, really?
Wasn't.
Oh,
I didn't know you back then.
Oh, yeah, weird.
I wasn't even in real estate back then.
Oh, really?
Because I got in 2010.
Oh,
so
crazy.
That was before my real estate, you know, heydays.
Oh, crazy.
But I want to say it was 5.7. And whatever. It's like I was a first-time buyer. You know, that was a long time ago. I was, 15 years ago. It's like... I didn't necessarily know what I know now, obviously. Right. And so, I was just happy to be like, hey, I'm getting a house. This is cool. Like, it's a big life step.
And we still have people doing that, though. That's the crazy thing, Rob. Think about that. Like, there are people telling them not to buy because of the rates, right? But there are still people who don't own who are buying, and it's okay. Like, I'd much rather buy than rent.
I totally know that that's the truth. And the other thing is, like, and it's hard when you're like a first-time buyer to be thinking on these terms, because you just haven't necessarily, well, for the most part with first-time buyers, just considering that they're, younger, let's say, that whole thing, it's like you just haven't experienced life at the extent that you know what it's like to see a pandemic, or what it's like to see rates go from nothing to something to nothing again, or whatever it might be. And so you just don't know what you don't know. And you're like, hey, whatever, this is just how it is.
Well, all you hear is your parents or your
somebody
grandparents.
That knows
Somebody's
something.
Chirping something in your ear, and it's like, okay, well, thanks. You know what I mean? Like.
And then you're like, well, God, I hope that person knows what they're talking about.
I know. Well, and the hard part is everybody's got an opinion for everything.
Oh, I know.
And it's, that makes it harder. But I still feel like if my kids were out buying, and as a mortgage lender, even if the rates are at 7%, if they're paying their own mortgage, it's much better, isn't it? As long as they didn't overpay for the home, like, outbid like by a ton, they're still better off buying a house.
And I think even if you overpaid for the home, unless it's like the home itself is like some really bad location that's like, going to face some, functional or economic obsolescence or something like that. With the environment, or it's just a bad buy in general, no matter what market you're in, because it's like repairs.
That could happen, yeah.
But that real estate's going to always go up. So,
it always does.
So and you just be patient.
Yeah, and the thing about it too is like, I mean, the one way to wealth is always through real estate.
Yeah.
The main thing that will be somebody's biggest asset is their actual home that they're living in, right? So we can't forget about that when we're going through like this time that we're having or these higher interest rates. Like, it's still an asset. And you're still building equity.
It's the one, like, asset that you actually get to enjoy that's not just on a piece of paper,
right.
With numbers on it from
it's
a market.
Your home.
Yeah, you live there.
Yeah.
And you can actually make that investment better if you know how to fix your home better
right,
or improve
exactly.
it. It's like the best investment, in my opinion.
I still think that to this day. Like, one of the smartest things I did, so when I was younger, I remember getting into real estate, but one of the things I did was I went and started buying rental property at a very young age.
That's huge.
Yeah. So I started kind of acquiring all these rentals, like I bought like one a year until I was like almost 30, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes
they're
ahead. It's kind of scary. Like, I remember calling my parents and being like, hey, I've got this idea. I've read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, Felisha, whatever you got. Like, I'm always like an entrepreneur in my own little way, right?
Definitely.
But, and granted, like that creates its own wealth with time. You know what I mean? It's not like an overnight, like you're going to get rich. Like, I didn't win the lottery by buying a rental. Let's just be real. It's like a long-term play, But if you have, going back to asset allocation, if you have your 401k, then you have your personal property, and now I've got other real estate. I mean, it's a good balance,
Absolutely.
And then
good
you have maybe, and then you have a business on top of that, that you're taking some risk. It's smart. And
you can leverage it if you choose to.
Yeah.
And that's just all about being savvy and what do you want to do with all that. So, but you can't leverage it if you don't have it.
Right, exactly. And granted, it's like I said, yesterday I told Rob I had to I'm going through the eviction with somebody, which is totally heartbreaking. I've never had to evict anybody before.
It was always tough, yeah.
Yeah. But, even in that case, it's just the real estate is still there. It's still an asset. There's equity there, especially over if you bought real estate 5 years ago to now. I mean, the last 2 years, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's been between 15 and 20% appreciation. Is that what they're saying?
Oh, yeah. It's still good.
Yeah.
The market hasn't come down. It's just kind of balanced because it was like a rocket coming out of a cannon.
Right.
It was just going straight up so fast that it's kind of good. It's Jesus, it was insane.
It was. And so it's balanced out, but those are still worth something. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
They made some money. Where the market, if you look at the stock market, I'm not sure what the percentages there are, but they weren't quite as good as the real estate side.
Definitely. And I think, the stocks are great. That book that you just talked about, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he talks about, basically getting your real estate asset class and then go take some risks in the stock market, kind of with maybe some of the profits and cash flow that you make from the real estate. And then you're not having to worry about, oh God, I just lost all my cash and I don't have any real estate.
Right.
You just lose it in the marketplace instead. So that's why real estate's great. You can touch it.
Right, exactly. You can drive by it and make sure somebody's still taking care of their lawn or whatever it may be. So.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've been going for a little bit here. I feel like we kind of go. I mean, we've been going for 53 minutes.
Oh, wow, Rob. I didn't even realize it was that long.
That's what I thought. I'm like, okay, well, we could do this again if you would like to. Or if there's anything else in the last 5 or 10 minutes here that you would like to kind of just talk about. Or
I think we covered it. I mean, I just keep your head up.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing. I think the biggest thing is if you have debt you're nervous about, or the biggest thing I see with people is they wait till it's too late if they need help, right? Especially on the finance side, just ask.
Totally.
I mean, reach out. If you need somebody to give you advice, talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about and get that advice. Because right now it's easy to try, to be in a hole or feel like it. But it's better if you talk to somebody now about it when you're in too deep and you're missing payments or in foreclosure. I mean, Rob will tell you that same thing.
Definitely.
It makes it so much harder for us to help.
Yep, because underwriters and it's just, you're trying to, there's a lot of solutions that can be made by moving the pieces on the board around.
Correct.
And if you don't understand that board game that well, then heck, it's like, how could you expect to be doing that proficiently. But if you talk to somebody that does know, you might be like, oh my God, a light bulb moment. And,
exactly.
And it's all fixed.
And I think that's the biggest piece I see. And I'm sure, like, even there's been times where I'm like, you just might need to sell your house. Like,
you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Like, you can't afford the house maybe, or something's going on. And we've seen situations like that, but it's way better to do it before you get in a situation where you can't help yourself. Because a lot of times, like, there'll be equity in there. I mean, I've seen people foreclose that have tons of equity in their house. Yeah. And that's really heartbreaking.
It's kind of crazy to think about that.
Yeah. It's sad. It's super sad.
It is, just because you don't understand.
Yeah. And it's just because they don't know what they're doing, or think they're in too deep. And so, I just say reach out. I mean, that's the biggest thing right now.
That's great advice.
Yeah. Especially right now, like, even as a realtor, or if you're struggling, like, mentally or whatever it may be, like, there's always somebody that wants to listen.
Yeah. And you can find strength in that, and just be like, it makes it so you're not like, hey, it's just me.
Right.
It's like, oh, this is not as personal. I can figure this out. It's not like my fault.
Right, exactly. And it might be your fault, but it's okay. There might be a solution you didn't think about.
Absolutely agree.
That's
sage advice.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I'd say, especially during these economic times that we're facing. Yeah. I mean, I think even economically, it makes people, mentally, the mental thing is super hard. If you're like, I've seen people, there's been a ton of suicides, even on that regard. I just say reach out. Like, that's the most important time to reach out, is when you're struggling.
That's great advice.
So
absolutely.
I don't know. That's all I've got, really.
Hey, I think that's as good a way that you can finish it off.
Yeah.
Is like saying, hey, you're not the only one that faces these things. And, at the end of the day, it might feel like it's game over, but it's really not. It's like just a perspective reorientation of what life means to you and what you're trying to accomplish, and friends can help you get there.
Yes.
Yeah,
I do appreciate your time though, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like super grateful that you wanted to come on and share about your knowledge and stuff. So
thank you.
Yeah, awesome. All right, everybody, tuning out. If my mouse will work.